Those committee members are Lombardo, Amobian, Fusco, Boys, and Bolden. We do have all committee members present. Councilwoman Amobian is joining us online right now. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you for coming today for our Budget and Finance Committee meeting. I'd like to just start off with last week's meeting minutes. If I can have an approval of last week's minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. Today we have the fine folks for economic development here, and for more discussions on our operating budget. So I don't know if Mr. Fricker is going to start off, or
I really have nothing to add. I know we
Susie
have
Graham.
a few of our departments here to to field some further questions. So
Okay.
With that,
Yep, and we are on page 194 of the budget manual. And you could start off, or I'll start off with a couple questions. Doesn't matter to me.
Whichever way you'd like to proceed.
Okay, all right. So anyhow, I noticed, I'll start off with, noticed as far as one of your goals, it says to, I'll read it, just, it says here, to attract, about retaining Akron businesses, okay? Building relationships with all Akron businesses, not necessarily downtown Akron, not necessarily maybe in the great streets, and create some connections to support them and resources as they're needed. So I'm trying to find, actually, in the budget, if there's a specific line item that relates to that. What do we have to offer to businesses in Akron?
Sure. So when it comes to business retention, expansion, and attraction, one of the most important things that we will have once this person begins their work, so this would have been Brad Beckert's former position as the BRE manager, is the time and attention that the city can devote to the business owner, understand their needs, and then be able to connect them with different assistance providers throughout the city. So one of the things that we've learned over time is that grants are certainly helpful. Everyone is thrilled to receive a grant because that helps you, conquer a financial hurdle, but that does not necessarily build a stronger business practice for you. So one of the most important things that we can do are connect our business owners to different assistance providers who can provide additional education, potentially connect them to the state if they would be eligible for state resources, and then also at the county level and through the many nonprofits and folks like the Development Finance Authority who can provide meaningful resources for those businesses to be able to evaluate their financial capability and then also their business plan so that they can move forward in the most sustainable way towards growth. So most of that is people-powered, to be honest. And that comes with the BRE work. We've talked about the Elevate Greater Akron portfolio. The Elevate Greater Akron work identifies a number of different focus areas that BREA manager will zero in on. One of them is the polymer cluster. As we're very well aware, the polymer industry is very important to the region. So the polymer cluster, regardless of the geography of the business, so long as it's in Akron or in one of our joint economic development districts, will receive their attention as a priority. Additionally, we have a portfolio for the top employers in the city. They also will receive that same attention from that manager, as well as scale-ups and mid-market businesses, and then also our minority and women-owned businesses as well. Great Streets, which LaTonda Mobley is the Great Streets Administrator, is a separate portfolio, but in some ways it interacts. So in the Elevate Greater Akron portfolio of businesses, for example, in the minority and women-owned businesses, there's a significant overlap with businesses that are located in the Great Streets neighborhood. So since we have LaTonda, who is overseeing that work, she's aware of where there's that overlap, and she really is the relationship manager for those visits. But all those things to say, that does not mean that if a business is not in a portfolio and not in a Great Street, that they do not get that same attention. So that we are also trying to manage to figure out what businesses are not in our Elevate Greater Akron portfolio and are not in our Great Streets, and try to make sure that we are also figuring out ways that we can spread the capacity that we have and make sure that they have our time and attention as well.
So every business should be fitting into some bucket, one way or another.
Yes,
And
so
that's what you're trying to identify.
every business is important, and there are a lot of them. So trying to figure out how we do that in ways that are mindful of the capacity that we have is also very important.
Right. And so I might have missed it. Brad Becker has retired.
Yes.
Right. So did I miss, you're still trying to replace that position?
Yes, you should be meeting that person next Monday.
Okay, very good. And I know Latanda has been very helpful with some of my questions, especially regarding small businesses and everything that she does to support them or to help them. I get it, everybody loves to receive a grant, but that shouldn't be part of your business model. That's not, sustainable going forward. But I guess back to the budget, like where in the budget here specifically is the line item for, I know you mentioned people power, but where is the line item for any type of, maybe the neighborhood grants or things like that?
Yeah, so, to the extent we'll talk, more about grade streets, that comes under the CDBG budget, or has over the years. Specifically, it's been in our capital budget, and over the last number of years, council and the administration has the $500,000 allocation towards what we call BRE grants. That money is shown on page 203. It is under, it's the final line, it's called other expenses. And in that as well, in those numbers as well, is the amount that council authorized us to give over the next 3 years to the polymer cluster, as well as support of the university's Polsky project.
Okay.
About
that's-
500,000 of that is the, what we call the BRE grant.
The neighborhood development grants or neighborhood, maybe I'm saying it wrong, the neighborhood grants for small businesses or nonprofits are where? Is each council still getting that? Each council member still getting those?
So those are under the city council budget.
Oh, that's under
Yeah.
city council?
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions by committee members or council members? President Margot Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just had some questions on specifics. What have we accomplished within the past year in terms of attracting new business, also retaining and supporting businesses within the past year?
Sure, that's an excellent question. I'm going to skip back to my notes from before. We highlighted a few of the retention and attraction grants. One of them went to Akron Polymer that helped, oh dear, hang on a second. All right, so we participated in 201 Elevate Greater Akron Business Retention and Expansion visits and an additional 57 small businesses that were outside of the Elevate program. And so those businesses have been retained, and that is part of that retention activity. And we worked with the state and also local representation during those meetings that provided over $13 million of investment. That yielded over $13 million of investment from those businesses and $24 million in increased payroll across all of the visits, as well as the revitalization of challenged spaces in the city. So some of the Great Streets work specifically goes into facade grants that assist us in improving the infrastructure within our neighborhood business districts to help improve their appearance and also stabilize those structures.
And if we can talk about incentives, I've heard from a lot of businesses that there's other cities who are courting a lot of our businesses or trying to say, hey, listen, we can do this and give you this package. What type of incentives do we provide to attract business, but also to keep people here?
So there's a number of strategies that we can use. One of my biggest concerns as a director of economic development is when we look at other cities, oftentimes, and I can find you an article on this from the Johnson Foundation, incentives are a race to the bottom. And so we tend to give incentives for businesses to move into the city and then are turning around and they are being incentivized right back outside of the city if we're not thoughtful about the way that we're doing it. So, there's a couple things to this strategy. One, I think at the neighborhood level, the Great Streets facade grants are still an important way of helping to stabilize that structure. I also really appreciate Latanda's idea about creating a grant program for relatively small grants, like $5,000 in professional assistance to help our neighborhood business district businesses improve their business practices and overall sustainability over time. I prefer them to grow stronger and be inside the city, then take that same amount of resources and deploy it to try and attract new folks into the city. So that's where I really want us to emphasize the businesses that we already have and how can we encourage and help them to do a better job with their businesses and be more well-equipped to be able to grow. So that's one strategy. The second one has to do with a tax grant. So it is possible, if we were looking at a business coming in from outside of the city, that we could provide an income tax grant for a portion of the income tax that would come into the city. It's possible for us to entertain that. But what is important is to make sure that, number one, they're not in one of our Jobs Preservation Act communities that is established by the County of Summit. So we have an agreement, sometimes it's in shorthand, we call it the anti-poaching agreement. So we have an agreement in place with our neighboring communities that if we pull businesses from those neighboring communities that sign this agreement, there will be another tax share that's required. And that's where we're starting to race to the bottom. If we're just moving folks back and forth between communities, it's a net loss for us. So we want to make sure that people are in those, number one, that our relationships with those other communities are in place so that we have that jobs preservation agreement in place. And in areas that we don't, if we wanted to entertain a tax grant, we might be able to do so. But it's important to make sure that we're doing it so that it is truly a net win for the city. So we want it to be a measured approach so that they are attracted here, but there is a net gain to our income tax bottom line that Mr. Fricker accumulates every year.
Okay, I think that kind of answers it. And so I'm assuming once you fill the role that Brad Becker once had, maybe we'll see some more maybe concrete plans of how we plan on retaining business?
So what I feel is the concrete plan to retain business is to spend time with them, understand their needs, and match them up with available resources. If we go to a business that is, let's say, looking at a different community, first and foremost, we want to see if there is a space that is available inside of the city that fits their needs. We work closely from the development manager, David Messner's side, with the County of Summit to do a very full search for a site that is eligible or applicable for what they're looking for, because we want them to stay. If we do not have it and they are expanding, and this is a problem, there are some folks who are looking for 32-foot ceiling heights, and we don't have those spaces here in the city, which means they're going to places where they have newer construction. And that's one of the reasons why we're working to aggregate sites and get those folks to build those structures that are needed. At the same time, we're also juggling a challenge with the cost of construction right now makes it not profitable for many of those property owners to build those 32-foot height ceiling size, really large structures to get those businesses to stay. So we're playing a little bit of catch up right now from an economic development standpoint.
Okay.
We will continue to do the important work of meeting with the businesses and understanding what their needs are. I would be very hesitant for us to enter the business of providing grants or financial incentives to retain a business because we don't have enough resources to do that for all of the businesses that are within the city.
Yeah, just asking, because again, just looking at, and it's my children, they're 10 and 6, and we go to other cities, like, well, why don't we have this store? Why don't we have this? So just really wondering if there were anything new, innovative that Akron is really doing to attract and retain business. So thank you for what you provided. And again, I think your job, I was surprised on some of the goals, Summit Lake development, just focusing on economic development itself is like a full-time job plus. So the Summit Lake development thing, I was thinking would be more so like planning. And so this is probably more a question for Mayor. I don't know, is there a job description for the economic development director, and does it include, a lot of the Summit Lake development stuff?
Yeah, what I would say, and Susie is probably better able to answer than I, but we have the job description and we can share it. You know, going into this administration, I thought it was important that we retain the concept of integrated development, but that we make sure that the planning director was not simply subordinate to economic development. I didn't think that that worked, frankly, particularly well. And so going in with Kyle and Susie really gave them the charge of figuring out how planning and economic development work together kind of under the umbrella of integrated development. So, you know, in Cleveland, they would have an integrated development director and then a planning director and an economic development director, right? We have not had that in the past, and I think that's probably too much staffing, overstaffing. So that was kind of the charge to Susie. So you have in some cases, like for example, with Mr. Messner, development manager, where in some cases he reports to Susie, in some cases he reports to Kyle. You know, with many of these projects, Summit Lake project's a good example, there are aspects that relate to economic development and there are aspects that relate to planning. And so it is important to figure out how they interrelate. Susie, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, the only thing I would add, so the grade streets are very specific geographies that we've been working with, and Summit Lake also, through reimagining the Civic Commons and the work that AMHA has been doing to plan for that neighborhood, has been very geographically specific as well. And part of my early conversations with both AMHA and some of the residents in Summit Lake had to do with the economic development aspect of what would have been the Choice Neighborhoods grant. And that work was very sort of base level work, but intentional work. So where are there entrepreneurs that are existing in the community, and how might we meet them where they are and provide some assistance so that they could upscale, and potentially grow their businesses in Summit Lake. And what I didn't want to do was, regardless of the future of that specific grant application, was pull back on the opportunity to deliver some of those resources specifically to the neighborhood. So we'd started some introductory conversations, and because of the path that the grant application choice was made with AMHA, I just didn't want to pull back on those promises that had been discussed with different economic development partners in the neighborhood.
And if I could, you know, thinking about or speaking to the relationship between economic development and planning, particularly around the Development Services Division that David Mester manages, you know, that division is responsible for acquisition, disposition of vacant land. And as you know, we have a ton of parcels in that neighborhood that we're trying to figure out how to deploy as effectively as we can to advance the neighborhood. And so, you know, coming out of the plan, coming out of the rezoning, we've made some preparations for releasing some of that land for development in ways that we hope are complementary to the neighborhood, advanced neighborhood goals. David and I both went out to the Summit Lake Neighborhood Council, I think it's called, a few weeks back to talk about these plans. We've got some legislation that'll be coming in related to that in terms of an RFP for vacant land so that we can you know, spark some development in ways that address neighborhood goals, but also are mindful of neighborhood concerns. But we're working very collaboratively on that. And we'll be talking with, as it's in your award, with you very shortly about that as well.
Thank you. I do see Councilwoman Linda Amobian, her hand up, so I want to acknowledge her.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susie, I don't have to talk about all the work that you've been doing, but just curious about all the good things that are happening on the east end of Akron. And certainly I am hearing great things about some of the work that's happening downtown, particularly with some of these buildings that are being purchased. Don't know exactly how they're going to be fully utilized, but just nice to know that we have some potential tenants or owners or renters or whatever they would be called at the end of the day. So that to me is promising. No one has been more critical of Bounce than I have in terms of the building and all of that. But every time I go there, I am more than impressed with what they are doing. One of the things, it would be good for the new CEO to come and tell us about the new businesses that are in that building. And if Latanda could, and please correct me, Latanda, if it's Latanda or Latanji, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name. If you could tell us about some of the challenges that some of the folks in the minority communities are facing. And I know that we have the Black Chamber now under Reverend Dijonette and the young lady who came with him. So those are some partners that we can begin to work with and talk to about how we move forward on some of these kinds of things. So if you could address those things, that would be helpful.
Absolutely, and you got it right. It's Latanda.
Okay.
Thank you for that. We are finding that the challenges that some of our micro enterprise business owners are facing are professional development, technology, and soft skills. We have done a good job as a city and a county in terms of access to resources, capital and otherwise. So we are bridging that challenge with communication and making sure that they have access to those resources that are readily available. So thank you to the whole team for your support of those resources. And now we are working to bridge those other gaps. So we do have professional technical development services that are available, and we're making sure that our entrepreneurs know about that. I am working with the Black Chamber as well as the Greater Akron Chamber to make sure that we are addressing some of those challenges as well as moving forward with entrepreneurial development. So not just developing the business, but helping the entrepreneur themselves develop. So I hope that helps.
If we could, excuse me, just a follow up. If as a council, if we could get quarterly reports or something, just so that we know, because we realize that we're not going to make quantum leaps in some of these areas, but as long as we are making some progress, I am and focusing because we've been talking about that area for a long, long time, and just to know that we are focusing on it and doing something about it and helping people grow and stay in business. I like the idea that the mayor did recently with the daycare providers. I mean, we need more of those, I know, but a lot of those are women and Black women and people that need some basic kind of business skills to stabilize their businesses and maybe grow them. So a lot of those things are helpful, and I think a lot of those things we need to pay attention to because even though it may look like small steps, we are helping some of our businesses stabilize, get stronger, and maybe move in the right direction. So that kind of stuff, if we could get more reports just to see how they're moving. But I hear great things about the East End. I know the East End is moving, so I'm not really sure what all you're doing down there, Susie, but
The
you
great
may want
news
to
is
talk a bit.
that we have revamped the Great Streets website, and it is now under the city's website, so tucked under economic development. We will be updating the Great Streets websites with those very types of updates so that you're aware of the number of business visits, the number of grants received, the vacancies in areas for property ownership within the Great Streets districts, that kind of thing. So you will have access to that data on the website.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And was there a question down here? Okay, Councilwoman Tina Boyce.
Thank you. Thank you all for this extended conversation. It's good to hear some of your ideas a little more granularly. My question is specifically around, maybe it's Great Streets, I'm not sure. So, you know, anyone who works in the CDC world knows, like, CDCs are the developer of last resort. You know, this is because small businesses and property owners, you know, don't see things penciling out on their end. And in a lot of our neighborhoods, that's the issue, more so than necessarily business support. At least that's been my experience, having done the work. So I see a lot of information about supporting businesses, but I don't see a lot of information about supporting the the neighborhood per se, like creating a good street environment, the types of things that Great Streets used to do. So I'm just wondering, like, what are your plans to equip neighborhood level development that does not pencil out for a business owner or property owner for profit?
Sure, so it's an excellent question, and I can feel Kyle standing up as well. So this is another good example of where planning and economic development work hand in hand. We do have a portion of the Great Streets budget dedicated to infrastructure and public improvements as well. That started in a very robust way several years ago from a street lighting perspective. I know Latanda's been very interested in moving forward with camera projects to increase safety as well, and that's been a need that's been identified in the neighborhood. But then also, while we're focusing on private businesses for some of the facade grants and the small business assistance grants, there are other funds, still CDBG funds, but those are available to help support the good work of the CDCs in the city, and that is actually under Kyle's purview. So I'll let you speak to that.
Yeah, obviously, we're waiting on the federal government to figure out what the budget's going to look like on their end, but we will be renewing our support for the neighborhood-based development organizations and offering that program pending funding, obviously. And that certainly does a lot to create positive energy and change in many of the neighborhoods. So there's that piece of it. I would also say that, you know, the paying attention, and this is something that I think the two of us as directors of planning and of economic development respectively are on the same page regarding, you know, understanding the interplay between, you know, the neighborhood business district and its sort of catchment area is something that we're paying a lot of attention to. Understanding that, you know, when we think about businesses, neighborhood-facing businesses in certain areas, you know, that are struggling to survive, that are, you know, making those difficult decisions about potentially moving and those things. What we want to focus on is, or need to pay attention to, is building up the buying power that is naturally going to gravitate towards that business. And Councilman Hanna stepped away, but, oh, there he is. You know, he had a letter in the Beacon a few weeks back talking about the closing of drugstores in black neighborhoods, I think specifically thinking about, you know, Copley Road. We need to rebuild the buying power to make it more economically feasible to maintain those businesses, and that means we need to you know, do all this work alongside, you know, continuing to make it easier for the infill development so that we can make those neighborhoods vibrant enough, full enough that they can support those neighborhood-facing businesses. It's a very important piece of our work. And that's why the infill, which is, you know, we had legislation this morning, you know, with the small builders, going to bring six houses to a couple of our neighborhoods. You know, that infill is a very different animal. It's supporting that, making that easier is different than doing 150 units in an apartment building or bringing up a development out of the ground. And so paying attention to that, and these are things, again, that we're working on, trying to figure out, make it easier. But that's a very important piece of having a vibrant neighborhood business district.
And I appreciate that. And, you know, I know you're familiar with a lot of the stuff that's going on in Cleveland with like neighborhood planning and, you know, bringing, you know, recycling old buildings instead of knocking them down, that sort of thing. And, you know, I think, you know, this is just my perspective. And I know we have many things to balance, but, you know, having someone thinking about neighborhoods holistically, like through the lens of neighborhood, not just economic development, working with planning and vice versa, but looking at what the needs are of the neighborhoods, where we stand right now, how each of the departments can support, you know, making small improvements in certain areas. Like if there's the ways to know where our baseline is, what our numbers are in neighborhoods as far as housing, but also, you know, health-wise and those sorts of things. I know Cleveland's done a really great job of that and is measuring. You know, I would just, this is just my perspective. It would be a lot easier to sell a lot of this stuff to neighborhoods if we could say we have people focused just on neighborhoods that are liaising with you and making sure these things are working together. So I know it's the spirit of integrated development as well, but just something I'm seeing that I feel like is working well in other places that maybe someday we could replicate.
Thank you. Councilman Fusco?
On page 201, there's service contracts. There's nothing budgeted in '24. We did expend $1.2 million, and now we're budgeting $28,000. So just curious about that.
So that budget, that's the development activities budget. It really handles two different areas. So one are the HUD loans that we have outstanding, both for the Highland Square grocery store and for the Bowery project. So we have 2 HUD loans outstanding. And then it also handles the debt service payment that we make on the Ocasek building, or at least part of it. So basically, we collect, the state of Ohio has offices within the Ocasek building that they pay us rent for. So basically, we handle all the rent, but we sublease some of that space out to the state of Ohio. So we collect that money from the state and then pay it, to the Development Finance Authority. Now, where you see, so basically, you're looking at the service contracts. So that's just the way that rent hit last year. So it should have hit down on the next lower line under rentals and leases.
Right.
So basically, it was just the way it was coded last year. So, but that's what that budget is for, is basically places where the city has rental or debt service payments that we collect, and then the pass-through of that to pay debt service or rent on those properties.
So this whole, whatever this is, page 190-something, 201.
201, yeah.
This is all Ocasek?
No, so it's Ocasek, and it is the 2 HUD 108 loans that we have.
108, okay,
Yeah.
thank you. One more on page 203. 203.
Okay,
Yeah, it seems under the service contracts, we're doubling what our expenses were, and so just curious what that stands for, as well as the debt service piece.
I can't answer the debt service piece, but as far as the service contracts, those are including, again, items that have been brought to City Council, including the support of the downtown CDC, the Site Ready program, the pre-K program, or that we were just talking about, that we're doing with the $125,000 that we're doing with Rochelle Wardell and her office, as well as the support of the Black Chamber of Commerce. Those are additional things that were added.
Oh, so that's
This year.
under the service contract?
Yes.
Okay. So it's, again, a number of things that are listed underneath it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Can we
Yeah.
get that, all what they are?
yeah, just give me a second here. And the debt service piece relates to, there was a piece of debt that was funded both by JED and by TIF revenues, and now it is being funded entirely by TIF revenues, so that JED debt service is not there anymore, and that's why you don't see budget for that. In terms of the contractual services, and we are looking at, I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right page, so this is
203?
203, correct? So this is the BRE JED, okay, correct.
220.
So within that are, as we mentioned, so the pre-K childcare piece that we're doing
How much is
as support, that's 125,000. The Greater Akron Chamber contract is there.
150?
The
60.
160?
yeah. The Black Chamber of Commerce is there.
50, right.
And then we have our support of the Summit Medina Business Alliance is there for $75,000. We have an annual contribution that we make to the Akron Development Corporation for $52,000. This is the I think it's the 8th or 9th year of that contribution. It's $52,000 that we've been doing. I think we have either 1 or 2 more payments left on that. Some of the costs of some of the trade shows that our economic development employees attend are under that line item. I think that is, for the most part, those are the costs there.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Eric Garrett?
Thank you, Chair. My comment is directed toward Ms. LaDonda. First, I would like to thank you for reaching out to Mr. O, and just reaching out to those individuals who actually just are trying to navigate the whole entrepreneur world and trying to figure out. One of the things that was really nice to hear from the gentleman is that sometimes it's not always about needing funding. Some of the things that they would need is some of the things that you alluded to, whether it's those soft skills or just things of being able to reach out. So I want to thank you for that. My question per se is how are you able to reach all of the individuals who perhaps can't get or don't know much about the website? Do you have a team, or how are you in the field? How do you have boots on the ground, so to speak?
A part of our 4-pillar structure strategic plan for this year is making sure that I utilize my resource partners. So our CDCs, our neighborhood organizations, people like our Black Chamber, our Greater Akron Chamber, our partners at the county are all helpful in this regard. So they point them towards me, and then I point them towards the resource providers. Our resource providers and I have also created what we call the warm handoff. So we're making sure that it only takes about 5 minutes for me to introduce you to a provider, and then they take it from there. So it's a pretty intricate system, but it's working for our community.
Thank you, and it's really worked for the one business owner, Mr. O. So thank you so much for the work that you do. Appreciate
Thank
you.
you.
Okay, we have any other final questions from any committee members? I don't see any, so we thank you for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you.
Next up, we'll have our Department of Neighborhood Assistance.
That begins on page 179.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Sure, Mayor.
So I think obviously we had some discussion last week in regards to some of these, higher occupancy buildings and inspections. So we wanted to have our Director of Neighborhood Assistance, as well as our Fire Chief and our Planning Director and Chief NATCO Assistant for Emergency Management available to kind of continue that discussion, answer questions in relation to that. So if you guys.
Mike, page.
For neighborhood assistance, it is page 179.
Okay. Well, we can start off. Do you have any initial comments? Any here? Okay.
Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good. All right. As far as the neighborhood assistance goes, can you refresh our memories regarding to a lot of neighborhood services that we have with the sidewalk program, demolition of houses, and how much have we increased from last year, and obviously, and what that means to the community?
Sure. Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council. As far as the sidewalk program, that is actually handled through our engineering bureau under service. As far as our demolition program, we actually have a line item, and it fluctuates from year to year. Right now, we're currently working under our Ohio State grant, which is currently in process right now. We actually started out that particular grant with 96 homes approved through the state grant. I'm proud to announce now that we have completed 55 of those homes. So we're actually going to achieve our completion date by the end of April. So that will be done. So a lot of the homes that we've had on our list for a number of years are being taken out with this particular grant. So that's ongoing, and we will have that completed by the end of next month.
Okay, thank you. Yep.
I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, it's important for residents to, when they see something.
Absolutely.
That makes them feel better.
Well,
as far as what they're paying.
Sure.
Taxes for, as we all hear it,
Well, this grant through the state of Ohio has assisted us in moving our demolition program more aggressively. So we have taken down a number of homes already, and we'll plan to take down the rest of them before the end of the month. And that actually has taken a large part of our demolition list, overall list, has cut it in half. So
Right.
we're very excited about that.
And we do have like 4 contractors working.
We have 4 crews. We
Four
have
crews.
3 demolition companies in operation currently on the ground, but one of our companies has 2 crews, so we're operating 4 crews daily. That's allowing us to move through the list at a
4
swifter
times
pace.
faster.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah, very good. Yes, yes. Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
Microphone.
I was a little confused the first day, just looking over the whole thing, but it seems as though OID is kind of like spread out. You know what I'm saying, in terms of the overall, and maybe just a brief description of that, because now I'm seeing it under, and I think this is what started it, it's kind of under neighborhood assistance. I know, you have some of the recreation stuff, but then again.
So
just still-
if we look back to the structure that we had in place under the previous administration, so basically you had one department that contained what is now, planning and economic development. In addition, the Recreation Bureau was previously under economic development and is now under the Department of Neighborhoods. So now, we have not renumbered those, what we call cost centers, and that's where we put the budget in. So yes, there are some aspects of, for instance, you will find recreation, which is, now under the Department of Neighborhoods, still has coding, it's associated with the Department of Integrated Development.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that's, thank you.
When it comes to nuisance compliance, where do we see, like in the budget, how much, we've put into it, or how much of a problem it has been in the past, or what we think it's going to be in the future? And what's all encompassing of, nuisance compliance laws, I guess?
If I'm understanding your question, are you asking if we are seeing an increase in complaints? Would that be?
Well, where in the budget are we putting our dollars towards nuisance compliance complaints?
Sure.
Page 183.
And that is just in regards to like the service contract lines?
Yeah.
It's,
So the nuisance compliance, what page did you say that was on, Mike? 183. And there's really 2 components to that. So that contains contracts both for animal control as well as a lot of the cleanup type contracts, as well as mowing. So those 3 areas, and some of that is funded under the general fund, and some of it is funded under the assessment fund. So there should be 2 budgets associated with those items.
Okay. All right, that's good. All right,
How about on the I'm sorry.
good.
On the equipment side, on that 183, we're seeing the expenditure of 115K. Last year, we budgeted 100, and now we're not budgeting anything, and that's equipment construction?
Right, so they desperately needed new vehicles last year. So, a lot of the inspectors had vehicles that were, beyond being able to be repaired. So we did purchase some new cars for the inspectors last year, and that's what that represents.
Cool, thank you. Another question was where in here would we, well, I'm gonna pass, I need a minute. Too many numbers, overload.
Okay, that's all right. I'll give you a minute.
Thanks.
In regards to, inspections of all those apartment buildings, larger apartment buildings, how far have we come with that? And what do you see as the fix for all that, I guess?
Oh.
I know there's a couple large problems in Ward 2.
I'm assuming that's going to be a fire question, and it's going to probably be in conjunction with neighborhood assistance, with building code, and also it kind of treads on with our Summit County building partners. So that's a great question that you bring to fruition. So I think I told this body a few weeks ago, Akron is not unique dealing with the problems that we have right now. We have older infrastructure in this city of Akron. And, how do we actually handle these particular call for services and be on the preventative side instead of the reaction side as far as the mitigation? And that's going to take, as far as the overall holistic approach and how we're doing it. One of the things that I did was partnership with, it wasn't neighborhood assistance at the time, but it was the building department. This was in 2024. We started doing joint inspections with the fire department and with the our building department as far as our building inspection and with Summit County. So when it comes to the governing bodies that gives us the authority to actually implement what we're doing as far as when it comes to the ORC, that's one of our governing bodies dealing with 3737.01, 02, and so on. And we have the Ohio Fire Code also that deals with like apartment complexes, buildings, when to inspect them, what to look for, what are the violations. And a lot of those violations are dealing with the exits, when you deal with access, and when you're also dealing with the electrical system in these apartment complexes and the fire alarms and sprinkler systems. That's in my wheelhouse. Those nuisance calls and those other one-offs when somebody calls for, we have an issue in our apartment, then the authority that has to go ahead to get into that apartment, it falls under that building inspection. So that's why those joint inspections have helped immensely. And you asked the question where we're at. We are in a position right now, we're better than we were. We can put it that way. And when we take, for instance, the recent incident we had on Main Street with the facade falling, then we got the complaint for that call of service. Now with the fire department, we have the right not to just go into that facility, we have the right now to inspect every part of that building for the integrity of that building, along with our Summit County building apartment complex. So those are the things that we are being proactive about. And when we're doing the inspections now, one of the things that we're looking for, when we see a problem, we're calling our partners right away so they can show up on the site to help us navigate what that problem is. Instead of having to evacuate someone, let's look at how we can take those steps to condemn the building or work with the owner to actually resolve those problems.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I believe yours, when it comes to the Housing Compliance Division, I have Mr. Dwayne Greger here. He actually oversees, as you know, and he can speak to the strategies that we're implementing. You mentioned something in your ward. I believe I know what you're talking about, and I'm going to ask if Mr. Greger can come to the microphone to speak to that specifically.
And the question is Summit Ridge.
Right. Well, we have a number of multi-unit complexes in the city that have given us some challenges over the past couple of years. What we're trying to do with all of these is trying to coordinate all of the inspections under one person, normally a supervisor. It's difficult to take the ward inspectors away from their regular work to have them, when we have 14, 15 complaints at a development like Summit Ridge, then the rest of the wards are going to kind of fall by the wayside while that's being addressed. So we've been bringing the supervisors in to try to coordinate, get the inspections all done simultaneously. We just had a meeting with the property manager at Summit Ridge, went over with them item by item on all the repair violations that are there. We've been doing the same at Wilbeth Arlington, at Erickson, some of the other larger buildings. We also, when we find conditions that overlap jurisdictions, we make referrals and work with fire, zoning, nuisance. We have regular meetings, the general code enforcement meeting where we talk about these things at least quarterly to try to come up with plans of actions that include everyone so that we can try to resolve all the multiple issues at those properties. So.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Fusco?
Thanks. My question is I know fire inspection, and Chief, I think you came in and said you inspected everything in the city. Last year, I thought you said that, maybe I was wrong, but all the commercial structures. My question is there a threshold in terms of apartment building types that has like 20 units and up, 5 and up, things along those lines? Is there, whereas you go into those buildings to ensure compliance?
Councilman Fusco,
with the fire side.
Right, that is a great question. So when you're looking at a risk analysis, high occupancy, high vulnerability, that's would be one of the ones we would definitely look at on a year-to-year basis. When there's moderate risk, when it's not as far as the occupancy, when it's lower occupancy, we consider those moderate occupancies. One of the things that happens, though, a lot of these apartment complexes, makeshift, they kind of do construction within the apartments. That was the situation that happened on Main Street.
That's a shocker. I'm joking. But no, it's terrible what occurred.
And so what happens is the people that are taking advantage of, the vulnerable people that's there, they're not going to make that complaint and say, hey, we have limited space, we have issues.
Yeah, so, I'm just thinking whenever we have somebody on site, and I don't know if there's opportunities, because I know back in the day, we used to meet, you said you meet on a quarterly basis or something? We used to meet like once
bi-monthly.
Yeah, monthly, good. We still do that.
Every other month.
Because we started that way back when, and I think it's wonderful. But being able to communicate and maybe have just a minimal amount of cross-training, just to say, hey, put a flag in your pocket, and whenever you go out to inspect a building like that, and it's like something just doesn't seem right, you just let planning know, or let, whoever, the neighborhood assistants, sorry. But, something like that, and even on the other side, whenever a housing person goes in, and you guys know, I know you guys are pretty well cross-trained on that side of it, but, let them know what's going on. Sounds like you're already doing that, but I think that would be, and there's, like I said, minimal amount of training, just to say, look, and there's ways probably, I would guess, in terms of the, maybe, I don't know how good the county records are, but like I said, what happened, it happens all the time. Like you said, you got a 8-unit building, and then all of a sudden, lo and behold, it's a 20-unit building. And, sometimes those records, they're not bad in terms of at least counting mailboxes, knowing what's legal and what's not. But just an idea to throw out there.
Councilman Fusco, that is excellent. That was an excellent observation. And that's what we're doing similar as far as using those cross disciplines, because in their Title 150 with our Title 9, that cross references and things that may not be applicable for Akron Fire, they are applicable under the code as far as the nuisance for building. But no, excellent.
And something on top of it all is that, and I know for you, whenever you'd mentioned, when you have to schedule that with the building inspectors, the county folk. Mm-hmm. But that was a nice part about Brad being here, having somebody who's, and I know that wasn't his major focus, although whenever you had a complaint or something, you heard about it, a building issue type thing, you can call him up and he would check it out. And that's, it sounds like we're going to be filling that spot, but it's just nice to have somebody like that with that kind of experience who we could call upon, who can say, okay, here's a big problem here. We see that. But cross-training is, we're all believers in that, I think.
Sure, and in conjunction with the the point that was raised earlier, one of the other things or other layers that we have is recently we've been meeting regularly with the regional HUD office, Mr. Laviano and his team, and they are doing inspections as well. We're in regular communication, making sure that issues are being addressed and that we're seeing them, they're seeing them, they report to us, we see them, we report to them. And so we're addressing issues that way. That way we can triage some of these issues.
It's very strong. As at a couple of those meetings, it's wonderful that we're doing that. Very helpful.
And just to reiterate that, the last time we met, was it in February? We found out that there were a couple apartment complexes in the city that had been, because of the coordination with their enforcement level and the city's, Mr. Greger's group, that there had been a couple that had been forced really to do major overhauls rather of their management team, to fire management teams, and then in those instances sort of move off of their watch list. They've got a 5-tiered grading system, and they kind of are able to, a couple of them had actually moved up in quality of management because of that coordination, which was not planning.
Thank you.
It's just being kind of proactive. We're so, and it's hard to do that, say with limited resources like we have. But no, appreciate this conversation. Thank you.
Chief, did you have your microphone on at one time?
I did, but it's I don't know if it's germane to the conversation that you're having now.
Okay.
I was more in tune to the building on Main Street and what happened with it and what's still going on with it, so.
Okay.
Unless you have questions about that.
All right, okay. I see, well, Councilman Garrett was around, I don't know where he went to, but Councilwoman Amobian, question?
I guess my one question has to do with how much of this landlord stuff have to do with out-of-town landlords not having someone in town that we can work with. And the other question I have has to do with the White Pond Villa. I know for a long time we had a lot of complaints there and a lot of life-threatening kinds of situations, but I have been told that the elevators have been redone, either replaced. I haven't got any calls. And I used to have workers to go into that building as well as the one, Mayflower downtown. So just two questions as to what's happening with those and how much of this has to do with these out-of-state landlords.
Thank you for your question, Councilwoman Amobian. The first question, as far as White Pond Villa, the complaints there have gone down. There are still some outstanding concerns there, and we're, as I mentioned earlier, working with HUD. As they come up, we are addressing them so that we can move that particular property in the right direction. That is one of the properties that HUD is consistently watching, just due to the concerns that have been raised there. So that is not off of the radar by no means. As relates to the out-of-state landlords, and Mr. Greger may want to add something to it, but that is an ongoing concern. That is an ongoing concern that we've been discussing over a period of years. It has not gone away, and we have not come up with the appropriate way to mitigate that issue as of yet.
If Mr. Greger is going to respond, let me just say something. I know that Cleveland and I believe Columbus both have ordinance that they passed where the out-of-state landlord has to have a representative in town that can address issues that come up. So that's one of the things that I wanted the legal department to work on for me, because I really think we should have something like that to force their hands, because we had a whole parade of out-of-state landlords that came about a year or so ago and told us a whole bunch of whatever. And I don't think they addressed all the concerns that they told us that they were going to address over in the east side of Akron.
Yes, and Councilwoman Amobian, thank you for bringing up those other communities. Cleveland did do a revamp of their housing ordinances in the last 2 years, and it's something we're taking a look at and seeing how we can use it to strengthen particularly that portion. I had a relative recently who bought a house and in just a couple of weeks already received 2 offers to buy it, sight unseen. So, we are seeing more and more of these, we buy houses kinds of deals, and, whether they're even in the country is another question. And so looking at how we can work off that Cleveland ordinance and other ordinances to strengthen our ordinance, I think that'll be a big piece of really also why we wanted to make sure that neighborhood assistance was its full standalone department outside of service, so it really had the ability to focus in on some of these longstanding issues.
Thank you, Mayor. Councilman Garrett?
Thank you, Chair. Appreciate it. The question is for Chief Henderson. I just want to compliment you on the EMS and your team. I know that that's a cost that the city used to have to pick up and take on. Now that your team has done a phenomenal job in handling that, what happens now to those funds that we used to spend for that service? Now that we don't have to do that, where do those funds go? I don't know if that's for Mr. Fricker or to the chief, but I just wanted to tell you, I think that's just a wonderful job that your organization is doing, Chief.
Thank you, and I think Director Fricker is going to.
So let me respond to part of that, and I'll let Chief Henderson kind of respond to the rest of it in terms of what the staffing requirements are to do that. So previously, we did not pay for that service. So basically, there was a private service that performed that, in a sense, free of charge to the city, but then they were able to collect revenues from the people, from the insurance companies of the people that they transported in order to cover their costs. So they determined at a certain point that that revenue model was not working for them. So then the city was faced with a choice of either paying the private transport service to perform that function on top of what they would collect, for their billing of those services, or the city would take on that service ourselves. And that's the choice that we made. So we are taking on that service. In turn, we are now collecting some revenues, more revenues from that service than we were previously collecting before. And so with that, I can allow the chief can kind of elaborate more on what that entails in terms of our additional staffing to perform that service.
Councilman Gary, that's an excellent question, and thank you for commending our brave young women and men. That was a heavy lift. Chief Natko at the time was the chief when we had that determination as to are we able and do we have the ability to staff the units we need to staff and to give this city the support it needs, handling and fielding almost 48,000 calls per year. And we not only have we met the challenge, we've done an exceptional job on our call for service volume, our response times, our turnaround times at the hospital. What we've done as far as reimagined and reinvented our EMS system, we've taken quantum leaps. Because when you look at the way we staff our additional med units, the additional personnel that we have that Mayor Malik has allowed us to operate at 402, that's in my history of the fire department, and with this body giving the support that you've given us to fund us at that, the citizens, what you have done for the citizens of Akron is just absolutely amazing, and thank you for that. And what we've done is we've done an amazing job, sir. And we've not had to have any outside agencies come in to actually do any of our transports. And we've been 100% compliant on everything that we've done. And a matter of fact, just got a compliment from Summa Hospital and Akron General Hospital in reference to our on-the-wall time, our turnaround time, even while we're in triage and in transport at the hospital. So that was just told to us in our EMS committee. And we just found out last week we will be getting the Star of Life Award from the Red Cross from the Kelly Avenue response.
Thank you for adding to our city's bottom line. I appreciate you and your team. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, yes.
It's along those lines. How is it, because this is a new business, if you will, for lack of a better term, on the collection side? And are you benchmarking against other entities, be it private or public, in terms of the collection side of things? How's that?
That's an excellent question. So I know Director Fricker can attest to this. Every year, we've been able to get more sources added to the general fund. This particular year, I believe we're at 6.2, 6.3 million total.
Correct. So the additional revenues, so the revenues that we would collect for the transport billing prior to the city taking on, so we always had some component of that, but now we're taking on a lot more. So we used to collect roughly $2 million a year for those transports, and now it's in excess of $6 million. And that revenue goes into the EMS fund.
Well, it sounds as though it was the shift. Was it based on insurance? Is that why? It sounds like that's what it is. And so, they couldn't deal with that. And so now we're dealing with it. And that's the question. And how do you fill that gap? I guess whenever there's some kind of a gap, I'm sure, because they'd still be doing it if there wasn't, right? The private transport.
So the challenge is...
So, yeah, that's the...
Right. The challenges the private companies had when they did their collections, they were only able to collect so much from Medicaid, Medicare, and that was like a bulk of their call for services being billed. And when that was a limit put on the collection, if you were not in a contract with a major hospital, they only were able to collect a certain amount of money.
And then they're phased out. Gotcha, for the year.
And they came to us and was like, we're not a profitable business and we are a private business.
Yeah.
We need to collect their additional revenue.
Who knows what next week's going to bring too, so. Thank you for that.
Okay. Any other questions from committee members, council members? One more? Go ahead.
Sorry, this is going way back to a conversation we had about 15 minutes ago. The service contracts related to like mowing services and that sort of thing, I'm noticing kind of the fluctuation. We had budgeted 349 last year. We're budgeting 201 this year. I know a lot of the calls we get are, I just gave you two, right? And I know it's harder and harder to get the mows done. They're less frequent. Is that enough, honestly? Sorry. Tough question.
We tried the very best we can to manage with our contractors during mow season, and we're actually entering into that now. We do a good job of managing, but we still leave some unmowed. I'll just say that. But we do the very best that we can with the budget that is given to us, if that answers your question.
Thank you.
Well, I guess I'll piggyback on that because, Mr. Lash, I'll just piggyback on that because it just seems like that there is a lot of complaint. You're going to be getting a lot of complaints. High grass always comes around the summer, obviously. So when we spent, 111 last year, although the budget was way higher than that. Is it because the contractors weren't there to, handle these complaints? We spent 111,000. The budget was double, triple that. But so I'm sure the complaints are out there. So I guess the question is, did we not have the contractors to cover the complaints because we had the money?
Yeah, we actually were able to get through last season appropriately. There are some complaints that, just depending on the location, that we did not get to. So there are some that come in that are logged. We try to get to the primary issues first in residential neighborhoods. There are some that are in locations or locales that are not as much of a primary or priority. Okay. So those are, we hate to leave any on the table, but we try to get to those that are in neighborhoods that are promoting blight and and dysfunction. So we try to get to those areas first, and then there are some, unfortunately, that are not hit, but we would like to hit them. But to your point, we did leave some outstanding.
But the contractors are not the problem.
The contractors are not the problem. We
Okay.
actually have adequate contractors.
Okay,
yes.
very good. Mayor Malik, do you have a few comments?
Yeah, I just had, as we wrap this up, if there are further questions, I don't want to overlook that. But I really do appreciate the discussion. I know next Monday is the 31st, and so we're looking forward to final passage. I think that if there are any other further comments or questions, for the council members, please direct them to Chair Lombardo and to Mr. Fricker, and we can make sure to get those covered. If there are any places where, folks are looking at, potential changes, please also let Mr. Lombardo and Mr. Fricker know as well, hopefully by Wednesday, so we can get, if there's going to be a substitute. I know we've talked about a couple things. We want to make sure we get that as quickly as possible, but really appreciate working with this council on the budget process this year. I know, we're all dealing with a fair amount of uncertainty, but you see the investments that we're trying to make when it comes to fire, when it comes to police, to bring the highest possible level of service to people. I think that comes through in the work that we've talked about the last few weeks. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And I did not see, additional question from Councilman Garrett or Councilwoman Amobian. Councilwoman Amobian, go ahead. You have a final question or comment?
Yeah, this is a very quick question, and Mr. Lash could answer this later, perhaps. I'm just curious as to how many of those grass cutting properties were sold to neighbors, and that reduced the number of lots that you had to do because the neighbor then took on that responsibility. I mean, you can answer it later, but I'm just curious if that could have been part of your issue with regard to having less properties to mow.
No, thank you for the question, Councilwoman Amobian. I can get those numbers for you within the next 24 to 48 hours.
There's no rush. I was just curious as to that could have been part of the reduction.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good analogy, good analysis. Councilman Garrett?
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lash, as it relates to the funding, so then what would be the issue and or concern? Why, I know in a lot of the neighborhoods that I visit, a lot of times they have high grass or things of that nature. Why didn't we use those funds? And do you need additional funds, or what seems to be the issue in terms of funding for the grass cutting? I know a lot of the young men and women in some of the communities are looking for work, or other contractors are looking for work. What seems to be the issue, and why didn't we use those funds?
I would have to actually look at the record to give you a specific response on that. I will tell you that as far as the process that you referenced at the conclusion of your question, there is an official bid process that everyone goes through with the city of Akron. So if they are interested, then they have to enter the bid process, and it goes through our finance department. When you reference not getting things done, I mean, we prioritize residential areas. When we get again, we're complaint driven. So when complaints come in, we do the very best we can to handle and address those complaints as quickly as possible. There are some areas, again, that are in areas that are not as much of a priority because they don't pose any risk. So we try to handle the highly problematic areas first. Does that address your question, Councilman?
Councilman Garrett, you're on mute.
I'm sorry. Thank you. I do apologize. Perhaps maybe then it's the lots. Do we have like city lots that contractors need to cut or address? Do you have enough funding to cover all of those? Not like the blighted areas or things of that.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, we do those in conjunction with the residential complaints that come in. We do city lots as well, and we do contract them out. So yes,
Nope, that answered me. Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Garrett. Very good. Very good. I think that answers everybody's question.
Thank you.
And I don't know if we have any other groups here. We have any other groups that I'm not aware of? Okay. Very good. Well, thank you for your time. Thank you for everything you do. No other issues. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet in regular session at 6:30. Thank you.